Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. And I wish I could say this is going to be an awesome show full of great news, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be the best of news. Now, to provide you more value, I've been going through and I've been live streaming the hearings regarding election fraud. And I must say, at first it seems like, yes, we're getting somewhere. We're going to stop the steal. But it seems like we're being let down. You know, I don't know what to tell you at this particular point in time, whether there's any way to stop this fraudulent election from going through and having an illegitimate president, Joe Biden, in the White House, where we as the United States would basically be under foreign occupation. And I don't get it. I just don't understand what is going on with these Republicans. Now, some Republicans get it. Yes, so we can't cast aspersions on every Republican. But unfortunately, the Republicans that get it are far too few in order to be able to do anything. Now, we've had hearings, hours, up to 10 hours long, going through the data, showing election fraud taking place, witnesses to election fraud. And those who are at the hearing take a look at that, at least in Pennsylvania and Arizona. And they've been outraged by it. Now, in Pennsylvania, they've actually tried to do something about it, introducing a resolution. Unfortunately, the result was there wasn't enough time in the legislative session. And so in order to be able to stop the steal, they would need to come back in emergency session in order to consider that resolution. And from what I'm seeing here, it doesn't look like the majority of the Republicans, or at least not enough of them, are willing to do so in order to stop this fraudulent election. And I don't get it. Like you, I'm ripping my hair out, screaming at them, trying to ask, what the hell are you doing? What good is it to constantly be electing Republicans to show up in larger numbers, in order to get enough of them into office in order to push back against the left-wing agenda, when all they do is roll over and play dead in the face of a fraudulent election? Our democracy is at risk here. We're taking a look at losing democracy, and if we lose democracy in this election, where Joe Biden is illegitimately installed as president, you can forget about there ever being a free and fair election ever again. Because this is the Democrat pattern. They do something illegal, no consequences, no matter how much evidence is produced. A lot of times they get rewarded, so they engage in higher degrees of illegal activity. And the Republicans will never hold them accountable because the Republicans are so scared of being called nasty names by the Democrats and so scared of how the media would react that they will let democracy itself fail in order to avoid being called names in the media. It is sickening. It is just unbelievable what is going on here. And look, I have a question for these state legislatures. What's the big deal? I mean, you're in a no-lose situation here. We're not just asking you to take a look at the evidence that we are putting forth or the witnesses that we are putting forth, and then just from that alone, go through and declare the election fraudulent and appoint Trump electors and put him as president. We're not even asking you to do that. All we are asking for here, and this is why I can't understand why these legislatures will not do this. All we are asking for here is take this initial evidence that we have presented, these eyewitness testimonies that you are hearing, and investigate it before the election is certified, before the Electoral College meets. Do a full forensic audit of the voting machines, especially the Dominion voting machines, and do a forensic audit of the ballots to determine whether or not it was legitimate or illegitimate. This should not be hard because there's only two possible outcomes. Both ways, you look like heroes. And all you have to do is the basics of your job of upholding the Constitution. So what are the two possible outcomes? One, you do a forensic audit of the voting machines and of the mail-in ballots. You find out that, hey, this election was fraudulent. That we, the people, voted for President Trump. And through fraud, we got Joe Biden. So what happens in that scenario? You go through, you catch the fraud, you save democracy, we get President Trump for another 4 years, and we clean up all the election fraud and hold those accountable so that those who blatantly violated the law go to jail. Also, you got to understand, with what we saw on election day, was the Democrats giving you, the Republican legislatures, the big middle finger and saying, your laws don't apply to us, ha 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 ha, and then going off and doing their own thing in order to get the election result they want, not what we voted for. And look, if we voted for President Trump, and instead through fraud we got Joe Biden, guess what? We have been disenfranchised. Our voice in government has been eliminated. And so you going out there being worried about disenfranchising voters, don't you understand? The voters have already been disenfranchised. We're asking you to re-enfranchise the vote, to bring back democracy. All right? So that's possibility number one. Possibility number two is you do the forensic audit. Look, nobody has any confidence in this election whatsoever. I mean, nobody. I mean, even the left that wants to pretend like they believe in this election, just by their own actions, you could tell that they know the claims of Joe Biden as the winner of the election is pure BS. Right? So nobody has confidence in this election. I'd say maybe you might have 30-40% that actually believe this election in all reality. So let's say you do the forensic audit. You audit the voting machines, the software. You audit the ballots, make sure that they are legitimate, and by legitimate meaning that they complied with the laws that you set forth, that they were cast by living voters who actually live in your state. Now, let's say you do that, and after the forensic audit comes back, it shows that Joe Biden's election was actually somehow legitimate. Okay. Now let's explore that for a moment. If that was the case, then your actions to do the forensic audit and take a look at all of these anomalies would restore faith in democracy. You would be able to come out and say, we have confidence that this election was free and fair, and Joe Biden was the legitimate winner. Hey, if that is the case, if that is the result of a forensic audit, I would be okay with that. I would be disappointed. I wouldn't like the fact that we were stuck with Joe Biden for the next 4 years, but I'd understand that that's democracy. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. If you lose, you go back, you take a look at your marketing, you take a look at your platform, the issues, and you come back in the next election and try to win over voters there. That would be democracy. So even if the forensic audit came back and showed Joe Biden had won legitimately, you would be restoring faith in democracy. You would be restoring faith that this is still a government that governs with the consent of the governed, right? You would be able to go through and say, hey, democracy still works. And you would alleviate a lot of people who are pissed off at what appears to be a completely fraudulent election. You would alleviate that. And people would go through and go, okay, somehow we just lost. I don't understand it, but somehow that's the case. And because you would be able to restore faith that this is a legitimate election, we wouldn't feel like our country is now under foreign occupation, that China now owns the White House. We wouldn't, I guess we might still feel that way, but at least we would know that that was the actual will of the people. Instead of looking at everything that's going on, wondering why you're so useless, and then trying to check out whether or not this is the time that we need to be thinking about the Second Amendment. Because if you go through and you push this election without any type of forensic audit, with all the evidence of fraud that we have seen, and everything, and I mean everything, that is supposed to be in place to protect democracy and protect such fraud from happening, fails on a massive scale, people are trying to figure out what to do. Because if we no longer have a voice, you can't just say, go and keep voting. Well, we came out and we voted, and it didn't matter because the fraud overrode our votes. Right? So we know voting is no longer an option. That's not going to do anything. So people are going to start looking towards whether or not we need to exercise the Second Amendment. This is tearing the country apart. You want to bring us together, do the forensic audit. Either A, you confirm that Joe Biden is the legitimate winner, in which case you save the republic from the chaos that could be coming down the pipeline as people believe the election is completely stolen. You know, people would come out and vote and continue to engage, and maybe engage more vigorously in the Democrat process. Or you find out that Trump is the actual legitimate winner and you save democracy. But I have to ask you this. Why are you not willing to do it? That is the big question. This is what we can't figure out. Why are they unwilling, with so many people who are in belief that this election is fraudulent, and with so much evidence that has come out, you know, scientifically backed evidence, you know, going through all of the data and witnesses? Why is it with all of that you're unwilling to do this basic step, which, by the way, is your job and it's your authority under the Constitution? Why won't you do it? I can't figure it out. I mean, I'm almost starting to take a look at some conspiracy theories. Are the Republicans engaged in some devil's deal with the Democrats in order to overthrow and oust this president? Is that why most of them will not go through and do a forensic audit of this election? Is that the case? You know, because let's face it, President Trump has been the first president in a generation since Ronald Reagan, and maybe even, you know, before Ronald Reagan. You know, I have my questions about Ronald Reagan. I was just a small kid, so all I have is some of the history books and, you know, what records that we have. But President Trump is the first president that's actually been for the people. He was disrupting the power structure. He was creating an economy that worked for the middle and lower income class people. He was bringing jobs back. He was ending international wars, drawing them down, and peace breaking out in the Middle East, and the fastest time period between outbreak to vaccine that we have ever seen in history. And yet there's so many people that are pissed off about that. So many power structures that were upended because of President Trump, you know, the elitist class. And we see everything that's going on social media. And there's a lot that you in the state legislature could do in order to end the online censorship. But you won't do it. Why? And that's the whole point of this video. That's the whole point of this episode, is to ask why. Why wouldn't you go through and do that forensic audit? I have no answers for that. I have absolutely no reason why you wouldn't do this, other than you know what happened and you want to keep it covered up. That's the only explanation for why you wouldn't do a forensic audit. At least that's the only explanation that I can think of. And you going through and saying, well, there's not enough time, you know, the session has ended, you know, maybe we'll come back in January. Come back in January? You mean after the inauguration? So let's look at that for just a moment, shall we? So let's say you wait until the next legislative session. You come back in January and you do your forensic audit then. Joe Biden has already been installed as president of the United States, took the oath of office, now sitting in the White House. You do the forensic audit and you find, holy crap, Joe Biden didn't win after all. That it was actually President Trump that won. Well, what would you do then? What would you do at that point? Is there a remedy that if you did the forensic audit in January, after Biden is installed in the White House, is there a process to have that president removed? Oh, you might be going, impeachment? Yeah, we could just impeach him and then put the legitimate president in. Really? You think the Democrats in the House of Representatives are going to allow an impeachment to happen to Joe Biden? I don't. So you want to wait until it's too late to do anything before you do that forensic audit? And how would we, the people, react? Joe Biden takes the oath of office. He is now in the White House. You finally get around to doing the forensic audit. You find out that Joe Biden actually lost. President Trump is the legitimate winner. What do you think that's going to do to us, we, the people, knowing now, after a forensic audit, that we all elected President Trump and ended up getting Joe Biden? That's going to tear this country apart. At that particular point, people are definitely going to be taking a look at that Second Amendment, marching towards D.C., and you're going to see a violent overthrow of people who are in elected office for allowing this to happen. It's not just going to be in D.C., but it's going to be at the state legislatures as well, which gives you every incentive in the world to ensure that a forensic audit never actually happens or never sees the light of day. We know that. We know there's going to be a cover-up. You're just going to hope that we forget about it, that we go away, and that you don't actually have to do the forensic audit. But if you did that and you waited until January, what's going to happen? What's the recourse? How do you think the country is going to react to that? That's why you need to react now. This is an emergency. This is about democracy itself. It's that simple. It's about democracy itself. Your job is to do democracy. And I was listening to this hearing in Michigan, right? And they're going off, and when it was talking about how the election books don't balance, and they're going, well, it didn't balance in 2018, 2016, and all that. And I'm just like, okay, so let me get this straight. Because there's been a fraud in just about every election, you have apathy towards fraud. So just because there has been fraud in the past excuses fraud now? Is that really the excuse? And they keep going off. And you notice every year the out of balance of the voter rolls and the votes gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you just compare it to the previous election, sure, it doesn't look like it's that much of an increase. But if you compare it back a few more elections, you see it's more and more and more. So, I don't get this argument from the Republicans as an excuse not to do anything. Because there's been fraud in the past, we can accept fraud now? No! The fact that there's been fraud in the past and you did nothing, that's a stain on you. That's a stain on you, the legislature, for seeing this fraud year over year over year and doing nothing about it. That just goes to show what a worthless person you are in office. Not, oh, well, it's not that bad because it wasn't that much more of an increase from the previous year. We should be actually aiming for zero fraud in the election. Because every fraudulent vote that is counted, every vote that is switched, that is disenfranchisement of we the electorate, of we the voters. So they have complete apathy because they just accept fraud as part of the election process, and they refuse to do any type of forensic investigation into this, and they can't provide any legitimate reason why they won't do a forensic investigation now. And they haven't given us any indication that if they did it when they came back in January, that they would be able to do anything once they've uncovered the fraud. And that's assuming that the Democrats, not being, since they're not stupid and complete idiots, wouldn't just go off and destroy all the evidence, destroy, the voting machines, erase all the data, format it and reinstall the operating system with a different operating system, or go through and get rid of the fraudulent ballots, and then leave you with we can't figure out why this won't match, but we're very disappointed, but I guess there's nothing we can do about it. No! Get off your butt, do your job. And for everybody watching this video, everybody watching this, take a look in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. Take a look, everybody. Take a look at all of the Republicans who are just rolling over with complete apathy, not willing to stand up for you in any way, shape, or form to save democracy, and primary challenge every last one of them that's up for re-election in 2022. Challenge them and make this your main campaign issue. Democracy was on the line and they rolled over and played dead. That's what we need to do. We need to take a look at all of them in Congress. Now, I get it. There's a few of them that are going off and saying, hey, you know what? We're going to challenge the electors, Matt Gaetz. And I don't know whether or not there's any senators that are going to join him so that they can challenge the electors. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Hopefully, Ted Cruz will at least stand up and force a debate and a look at all of the evidence here. But, okay, if they don't do anything, because they're our last stop measure, right? And I have very little hope that they're going to do anything. But let's say they go off and they do nothing. They just let everything roll through. Then every Republican in the House, every Republican in the Senate that stood by and did nothing. It's not enough that they're just being quiet. It's not enough that they're just not, acknowledging Joe Biden as president-elect yet. That's not enough. Those who are not out there actively trying to get to the bottom of all the evidence of fraud, those who are not actively going out there and trying to challenge the results of this election until an investigation is completed, every last one of them needs to be primary. Okay. So I think I'm going to leave it right there. That's it for this particular episode. If you want to get more content, because I know I don't do enough videos, I understand that. If you want to get more content, subscribe to the audio podcast. You can find the cover art for that there. It's the Jacob Johnston Show. And right now I'm using the Stop the Steal podcast cover art. Okay. So subscribe to the audio podcast, leave me a rating and a review, hit like. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit subscribe. The only way we're going to be able to build up real conservative voices is when you actually come across them to subscribe to the podcast, help them generate revenues through ads. Subscribe to their YouTube channels, watch the YouTube videos, or at least have them play. Let them build up in advertisement revenues if you're not able to donate to them directly. This helps build them up, being able to provide you more content, more quality content, but it also helps fund the movement. Now, we can call it the conservative movement or the Trumpian movement at this particular point in time, so that the more you, and here's my commitment, and I hope a lot of people will come to this as well. The more you fund this channel, through the podcast, through YouTube, through Rumble, whatever, the more you fund this, or allow for ad revenues to build up, my commitment is that I'm going to try and keep things as simple and low budget as possible and use that money towards funding candidates who are strong conservatives that will stand up to the left to run in these elections. To run in, the city council, state legislatures, governors, U.S. Senate, U.S. House. I'm not sure I'll ever have enough money to fund somebody to run for president. And look, I can't do it by myself. I can't run for every single elected office in every single state all at once. I can only run for one office at a time. All right, so I want to build this up to be able to help fund other candidates to be able to run so that we can get rid of the useless, spineless Republicans that turn their back on us and roll over every single time, and have people that actually stand up with a backbone like Trump and go after the Democrats and hold them accountable to the crimes and restore democracy. All right, so don't forget to hit subscribe. You can hit the notification bell as well. Don't forget to download the podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back again soon.